Dr. Karen Roybal comes to us from Colorado College. So she is the Assistant Professor of Southwest Studies. Her specializations include Southwest Studies, Latina Literature and History, and Cultural Studies. So Dr. Roybal defines herself as a Chicana feminist. Yeah. Who just said, yeah? Yeah. Oh, it's you!
Another Chicana feminist!
Another one! I imagine this crowd is full of them. So without further ado, Dr. Karen Roybal.
Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I know organizing an event like this requires a lot of effort and planning. I'm trying. Can you hear me now? Recently, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Cochiti artist Virgil Ortiz, whose work focuses on the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, to draw attention to the impacts of colonialism on the Pueblo peoples, and especially the women. Ortiz's work specifically pays homage to the women of Cochiti Pueblo, who he says are not thanked enough for their roles in preparation for ceremonies, and importantly, for the significant roles they play in maintaining and carrying on traditions. That conversation resonates with me today as we recognize the rich history of women who, as Ortiz reminds us, have historically guided us through their knowledge and have kept our communities, cultures, and traditions strong, all while being subjected to oppressive systems and situations. Gender and imperial violence against women of color in particular has historically plagued this region. The legacy of Spanish conquest of the Americas, followed by a series of soulless methods used to colonize, including those methods used during the Pueblo Revolt, have continued to perpetuate the ongoing real-world trauma and racialized violence experienced by women of color, such as the femicides on the U.S.-Mexico border and the genocide and violent deaths of indigenous women that continue to this day. Today we're gathered here because we share a particular political and perhaps feminist positionality through which we hope to raise people's awareness and political consciousness about gender. Your presence here is indication that you've forged your own movement to acknowledge the importance of issues centered on gender that have thus propelled them into the public eye. You are, in other words, dynamic subjects who contest the internalization of what we now identify as neoliberalist modes of power. Our history of resistance is a long one. 5 minutes allows me to provide you with just a snippet of historical information about women of color in the U.S. Southwest, whose lives have not always been dictated by patriarchal systems that guide our governments, our cultures, and broadly speaking, our societies. Many indigenous women in our communities in the Southwest are from matrilineal clans. This means the culture, heritage, and property ownership follow the female line. Children are part of their mother's clans. Husbands become part of their wives' clans. Similarly, in the Mexicano and Chicano culture, women have been the purveyors of culture and tradition. Prior to the ushering in of a new U.S. legal system in 1848, just after the Mexican-American War and the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, women had independence that far exceeded that of their Anglo counterparts in matters of business and property ownership, which they managed on their own without consent from male figures. However, settler colonialism, heteropatriarchal ideologies, and the U.S. legal system shifted women's positions. We also know that beginning in the 19th century, through a movement we now know as women's suffrage, women across the nation fought for and were eventually afforded the right to vote in the 20th century. Yeah. But we also have to come to terms with the fact that race shaped women's status under and experiences with the law. Well into the 20th century, women of color fought for women's movements to also acknowledge the impacts of race and class in the narratives guiding them. The momentum of such movements is significant for tracing the genealogy of where we are today. As Representative Esgar noted, we've all seen the shift in the demographics of our government. More than 100 women were elected to Congress, a large percentage of which were women of color. Yeah. Today, I encourage us to think about what theorist Paulo Freire terms concientización. This political concept has shaped Chicana feminist positionality, because it raises people's awareness and political consciousness while revealing the interconnectedness of diverse cultural traditions. This consciousness raising also allows us to evoke a more transnational articulation of gender politics that transcends national borders, and to reclaim subjectivity during struggles for political recognition within dominant patriarchal societies. I want to end by sharing part of the Combahee River Collective statement on Black feminism. In 1977, they stated, quote, "We're committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression," and they saw as their particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based on the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. That statement still resonates today. Collaboration and community building between and amongst women are imperative to contest new colonial ideologies that continue to render us invisible or as second-class citizens. If we are to be true allies in the continued fight for women's rights in this country and across the globe, then we must acknowledge that our conversations and actions need to focus on gender and race and class and sexuality. That is when true change will occur. Thank you.
Thank you.